Hey guys, tonight we descend not into sleep just yet, but into the dim candlelit cellar of a medieval alchemist. You feel the air shift as you duck beneath a low stone archway, your footfalls soft on dusty flagstone. The room smells of vinegar beeswax, something vaguely sulfuric, and oh yes, that unforgettable aroma of wet goat. Welcome to the birthplace of medieval ambition, confusion, and the occasional small explosion. Glass beakers shimmer on shelves, catching firelight in green and amber hues. Some hold murky fluids, others puff with slow steam. A copper alembic hums gently over coals, its coil glistening with condensed vapor. You pass a wooden table where iron tongs, pestles, and small chisels lie like surgical tools waiting for the brave or the desperate. The man hunched over his notes, scribbling furiously in Latin, and symbols only his cat understands, is not a wizard. Not technically. He's an alchemist. 1 part scholar, 1 part dreamer, and 2 parts fire hazard. You hear the soft clink of glass against glass as he decants something purplish into a vessel shaped like a duck's head. That can't be safe, and it probably isn't. This isn't Hogwarts, and you're not about to levitate. But here, centuries before modern science, people really believed they could bend the elements to their will. Want gold from lead, eternal life from a slimy red stone. It's all theoretically achievable with the right mixture of mercury, philosophy, and luck. Mostly luck. And maybe a secret handshake. You probably won't survive this if you're clumsy. Glass shatters, mercury fumes linger, and the odds of lighting your own beard on fire are roughly 3-1. But somehow the alchemists endured tinkering by candlelight, mixing myth with math, hope with hazard. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious who's winding down with me around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch beside the workbench, fingers tracing runes etched into the wood. This isn't just a workspace, it's a battlefield of failed attempts. Little glass vials sit in ranks, some cracked, some scorched. A dried poppy pod rests beside a chunk of coral. There's even a bit of crocodile dung. Yes, that was a thing allegedly useful for sunscreen and purification rituals. Medieval multitasking at its finest. The alchemist wipes his brow, dips a goosefeather quill into a dark ink, and jots down a series of odd symbols, a snake eating its tail. A triangle with a line through it, and something that looks suspiciously like a farting angel. Historians still argue whether these cryptic diagrams held profound meaning or were just a medieval way to make sure no one else could copy your homework. Outside the windowless cellar, the world is cruel and chaotic, plague, famine, and feudal taxes. In here, though, there's purpose. A kind of divine order, even if it's sticky and smells like burnt honey. The alchemist believes he's deciphering the language of God, or at least negotiating a better deal with him through chemistry. And alchemy isn't just for the unshaven loners in basements. Rich patrons fund their work hoping for gold or a miracle. Some popes dabble. Royal courts quietly keep a few alchemists on retainer just in case, turning soup into silver pans out. Even Isaac Newton, centuries later, couldn't resist scrawling alchemical theories in his notebooks right next to his calculus. As you peer into a smoky crucible, you glimpse the future forming in the past: metallurgy, pharmacology, even early ideas of atomic transformation. But for now, your eyes water, your head spins, and a mysterious blue powder just hissed unexpectedly. You probably shouldn't have inhaled that. In one corner, a glass orb glows faintly green. It's mostly radium paint mixed with hope and desperation. Not safe, not even remotely, but beautiful, hauntingly so. A rat scurries underfoot and the alchemist doesn't flinch. That's not even the weirdest thing in here. He once had a toad that farted when it got near silver. Claimed it was divine confirmation. Spoiler, the toad just had a sensitive stomach. The night deepens. The cellar grows warmer, filled with quiet, bubbling, low chanting and the faint hope that this time the mixture won't explode. You stare into the cauldron, watching substances merge separate and dance in defiance of natural law. Maybe, just maybe, they're on the edge of unlocking something sacred or possibly toxic. And yet, isn't that the appeal? The dream that inside all this confusion, one lucky stir might transform the ordinary into the extraordinary? The alchemist leans in, eyes wide, whispering Latin incantations and crossing his fingers behind his back. You watch the liquid in the beaker turn from black to crimson. You wait. It explodes. Just a little. You wipe your sleeve and smile. Welcome to medieval alchemy. You blink away the acrid smoke from that tiny explosion, your ears still ringing with the high-pitched whine of ambition backfiring. The alchemist, unfazed, fans the air with a cracked pewter plate and mutters something about progress. You're not sure if he's being optimistic or just downplaying the fact that the last 10 minutes nearly destroyed his eyebrows. But that's medieval alchemy for you, a long, slow gamble built on rotten ingredients and impossible hope. You glance at a shelf stuffed with grimy jars. One reads Caput Corvi, Head of the Raven, which disappointingly turns out to be just powdered coal. Another promises oil of vitriol, which is basically sulfuric acid. And there in a corner, sealed tightly with wax and paranoia, sits a flask of what smells like fermented goat's blood. You're told it's for warmth of spirit. You suspect it's for summoning demons or gastrointestinal distress. This is where the fantasy begins to fray. You came in hoping for bubbling gold and swirling mysticism, but now you're elbows deep in rotten eggs and philosophical hand-waving. The dream of transmutation, turning lead into gold, is not just a punchline. It's the obsession at the core of medieval alchemy. And for some reason, everyone thought goat blood was going to help. The reasoning lead is a base metal, slow, heavy, symbolically impure. Gold, by contrast, is divine, eternal, and shiny. If everything in the universe has a purpose, then surely lead wants to become gold. It just needs a little push through fire, prayer, and an unreasonable amount of mercury. That push was called chrysopoia, literally gold-making. Entire lifetimes were devoted to this idea. Historians still argue whether any alchemists ever believed they succeeded or whether they just got good at faking results for their patrons and hoping no one checked the gold too closely. The process usually began with heating metals until they wept in crucibles, mixing in spirit substances, alcohol, sulfur, or the ever-popular quicksilver mercury. If you're wondering how many alchemists went mad blind or simply dropped dead during these experiments, the answer is way too many. You pick up a set of heavy iron tongs and hold them to the light. They're warped and slightly pitted as if from acid or divine punishment. Beside them lies a copy of the Book of the Secret of Secrets, open to a page smeared with grease and regret. One passage claims that placing powdered coral goat's urine and morning dew in an egg and burying it under a fig tree during a lunar eclipse will result in, well, something gold-colored, if not actually gold. Does it work? No. Did that stop people from trying? Also, no. It's easy to laugh now from the comfort of modern chemistry class, but back then the line between science and spiritualism wasn't so clear. Metals weren't just materials, they were alive in a way. They grew, matured, and aspired. Gold wasn't just wealth, it was perfection. Spiritual perfection even. And if you could make gold, maybe you could perfect yourself. Some alchemists weren't chasing gold for greed. They saw it as a symbol of inner purity, of the soul's enlightenment. Transmute lead into gold, and perhaps you could transmute sin into salvation. That was the deeper magic. Still, a lot of them really just wanted gold. Take the story of Nicholas Flamel. Yes, the same one J.K. Rowling borrowed. A real 14th century scribe who allegedly deciphered a mysterious alchemical text and achieved both immortality and limitless gold. Historians still argue whether Flamel was a master alchemist or just a guy with good press and no surviving tax returns. His tombstone is real. Whether he's in the tomb is less certain. Then there's the case of John of Rupecissa, a 14th century Franciscan monk who believed that certain metals held apocalyptic powers. He wasn't just trying to make gold, he was preparing to save the world with it. Imagine turning molten lead into hope and then bottling it for mass distribution. Bless his heart, he died in prison. You lean over a new experiment, a sealed beaker containing something thick and black, swirling slowly like tar, with an attitude problem. This, you're told, is the prima materia, the first matter. According to legend, everything comes from this stuff. If you can break it down and rebuild it, you can reshape the universe. Or just end up with ruined trousers. The alchemist adds a pinch of green lion, which is code for highly corrosive aqua regia, a mixture of nitric and hydrochloric acid. He does not wear gloves. You mentally prepare the bandages. As the fumes rise, he gestures toward a wooden cabinet with drawers labeled in tiny Latin scrawl. Sal sulfur mercurius. These are the tria prima, the three prime substances of Paracelsus, the maverick 16th century alchemist who loved arguing, loathed Aristotle, and possibly started the trend of drinking mercury recreationally. Paracelsus believed all matter, even the soul, was made of these three essences. Sulfur, flammable and passionate. Mercury, fluid and transformative. Salt, the stable essence. Add some goat blood for flavor. Of course it wasn't all chaos and chemical burns. Some genuine discoveries emerged from this fever dream. Alchemists pioneered distillation, early acids, and isolation of compounds. They built the lab tools that modern scientists still use, though preferably not while barefoot in a robe. As night deepens, the mixture in your crucible bubbles gently, then flashes violet. The alchemist gasps and makes the sign of the cross. He thinks something's happening. It's not gold, it's just hot wine vinegar reacting to iron filings. But for a moment you believe. Your eyes are still smarting from the vinegar vapor when the alchemist slams his hands down on the table and declares somewhat dramatically that the philosopher's stone is real. You're not sure if he means he's found it, dreamed it, or is just trying to impress the rat that's back and sniffing around the dried frog legs. You've heard whispers of this legendary object since you entered the cellar. The philosopher's stone lapis philosophorum is the holy grail of medieval alchemy. Supposedly it can turn base metals into gold, cure all disease, and grant immortality provided you don't accidentally drink it with goat stew, which is statistically likely. The stone is not actually a stone. Or maybe it is. Historians still argue whether it was metaphorical, mythical, or a misunderstood recipe for radioactive jam. Descriptions vary wildly, from glowing red pebbles to soft wax-like material to something that only appears when the planets are in just the right mood. You watch as the alchemist lifts a small wooden box with trembling hands. Inside is a rock. It's red, kind of crumbly, and smells faintly like cinnamon and wishful thinking. He calls it the projection powder and insists that just a grain of it can transform lead into gold. He sprinkles a flake over a coin and holds it to the candlelight. Nothing happens. He frowns, mutters something about humidity, and returns to stirring a different pot. You don't laugh, though, because you realize as you stand surrounded by broken beakers and faded texts that this isn't about gullibility. It's about longing for order, for power, for eternal life, or maybe just one thing in this confusing world to make sense. The stone has been described in more books than dragons. From the Emerald Tablet, that cryptic slab of wisdom attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, to the Rosicrucian manifestos that showed up centuries later, its trail winds through time like a rumor nobody's willing to disprove. Even Isaac Newton had a go at translating the Emerald Tablet between calculus sessions. He might have cracked gravity, but he never did produce any gold. And then there's Basil Valentine, a possibly fictional 15th century monk who wrote about the stone in rich allegory and dreams. According to him, you'll need to kill the king, dissolve the dragon, and marry the red man to the white woman. None of that is literal, you hope. But try explaining that to someone who's already marinated tin in goat fat for 2 months. The stone, if it exists at all, is also known as the red tincture. It supposedly requires the philosopher's egg, no, not an omelet, but a sealed vessel where ingredients gestate like an unborn idea. The mixture is heated, aged, rotated with the planets, and may be blessed by someone with a suspiciously long beard. It's not science, it's performance art with consequences. You sit by the hearth watching the alchemist carefully heat his latest concoction. The fire flickers across his face as he mutters more Latin. This time it's about solving the riddle of the elements, which sounds like something from a fantasy game, but in truth it's just about coaxing Mercury to behave itself. Quirky tidbit: one recipe for the stone includes calcined eggshells, human hair, and deer antler shavings. Another suggests letting a snake bite a virgin goose and then roasting both. It's unclear whether these ingredients are symbolic or the result of someone having a very long, very weird dream. And then there are the frauds. Oh, the frauds. Some alchemists less pure in intent, more creative with marketing, became traveling showmen. They'd perform transmutations on stage using sleight of hand, hidden gold shavings, or chemically treated coins. These guys would dazzle a noble court, pocket the payment, and vanish before the vinegar wore off. Early con artists in robes, which leads to an uncomfortable question: did any of it ever work? Historians still argue whether there were moments, real or mistaken, where an alchemist produced something golden. But gold doesn't lie. Modern analysis can often tell whether a material is natural or forged. So far, no medieval recipe has yielded success, and yet the myth persists. You rise and examine a small jar labeled rubedo. This is the final stage of the magnum opus, the great work. Alchemical transformation, they believed, moved through 4 phases: negrito, blackening; albedo, whitening; citrinitas, yellowing; and rubedo, reddening. These stages weren't just about color, they symbolized death, purification, enlightenment, and perfection. Like a psychological self-help journey, but with more sulfur. The alchemist leans back, eyes bleary, and sighs. He admits he's been working on his own stone for 20 years. Never quite got it. But sometimes, he says, it feels close, so close he can smell it. You nod because you've smelled it too. It smells like scorched honey and melted pewter, and maybe that's the point. The philosopher's stone was never really about producing gold. It was about transformation, about believing that through knowledge and patience and just the right amount of goat blood, the world could be reshaped. And maybe so could you. You hold the red crumb in your hand. It crumbles to dust. You don't find gold, but you do find wonder. Your fingers still dusted with red powder, you watch the alchemist roll up his sleeves, literally, not metaphorically, and shuffle over to his potions rack where glass bottles sit like sleeping snakes. This is his other obsession: not gold, not immortality via rock form, but liquid salvation. Potions, elixirs, drafts that promise everything from eternal life to losing a few pounds by morning. He calls the collection his aqua vitae, the water of life. You glance at a green vial labeled Amor Mortuus and decide not to ask questions. This is the realm of the elixir of life, a close cousin of the philosopher's stone. In fact, some alchemists believed the stone could produce the elixir, or was the elixir, depending on how flowery the Latin got. Unlike the stone, though, the elixir is almost always liquid and often stored in ornate flasks shaped like teardrop suns or occasionally ducks. The idea was simple enough: if you could distill the essence of life, you could bottle it. Sip a few drops and your organs would perk up like overwatered basil. Drink enough and death itself might get bored and leave you alone. Of course, what counts as life essence was up for interpretation. Some formulas called for crushed rubies. Others used deer heart, saffron, honey, and rainwater collected only on Midsummer's Eve. There's one recipe that suggests fermenting the blood of a particularly pious monk. You're not sure whether that means the monk had to be devout or just available. You hold up a flask containing something cloudy and golden. The alchemist claims it's a healing tonic made from rosewater vinegar and iron filings steeped in wine. You take a cautious sniff. It smells like regret and salad dressing. Still, the dream behind it is powerful. The elixir isn't just about living forever, it's about not declining. In an era where even a stubbed toe could end in amputation, the idea of a health potion was intoxicating. If a few drops could fend off the plaguey's arthritis or just help you wake up less cranky, wouldn't you at least try it? And then, of course, there's love potions. Yes, medieval alchemists dabbled in that slippery business too. The recipe usually called for herbs like basil or lovage animal parts with questionable symbolism, and sometimes bits of hair or fingernail from the person you hope to enchant. You're no expert, but that feels less like alchemy and more like the first 10 minutes of a restraining order. But these potions weren't just gimmicks. Some genuinely worked, sort of. A syrup of poppy and wine, effective painkiller. Wormwood tonic, useful in treating parasites. Even when the theory was laughable, the trial and error often produced something useful. Alchemists accidentally laid the groundwork for early medicine. Medieval pharmacology owes them more than it admits. One mainstream historical fact: distillation, a core technique in alchemy, was refined during this era, leading to purer alcohols, early perfumes, and even antiseptics. You watch the alchemist pour a red liquid into a long-necked retort. It boils gently, vapor spiraling into a glass coil before condensing drop by drop. It's science hiding in plain robes. Of course, some ideas missed the mark. Quicksilver mercury was once considered a cleansing agent for both the body and soul. Drinking it was thought to purify your insides. Historians still argue whether practitioners actually survived this or just glowed optimistically for a few days before passing out in a very shiny way. You find a leather-bound book titled Thesaurus Thesaurorum, the Treasure of Treasures. Inside are potion recipes scribbled with loving detail. One claims it can mend the humors of the spleen using parsley juice, goat marrow, and powdered emerald. Another is marked with a tiny skull and the word "do not ingest." It's underlined 3 times. The alchemist sets out a trio of flasks. 1 deep purple, 1 bright amber, and 1 an ominous black. He names them Dreamless Sleep, Gentle Fire, and Third Attempt, Do Not Open Near Window. You wonder what kind of man feels the need to label something so ominously vague. There's a story he tells as he works a tale of a king who commissioned an alchemist to create an elixir that would make him invulnerable. The alchemist succeeded, sort of. The king drank it, grew a second nose, and became impossible to assassinate because no one could stop laughing long enough to aim a crossbow. It's probably not true, but it might be. That's the magic of this world, half science, half story, and all hope. You open a drawer and find dried herbs in small parchment packets, henbane, valerian, hyssop. Smelling them, you feel your mind calm, your limbs soften. Whether it's chemical or suggestion doesn't matter now. The potions hum with memory. You're part of something older than medicine and messier than myth. Quirky tidbit: one alchemist swore that bathing in wine infused with lavender and crushed emeralds not only cured depression but made your dreams more interesting. He also insisted you repeat Latin poetry during the soak. Something about cadence enhancing the spiritual frequency of bubbles. You take a deep breath and realize something: the alchemists weren't just brewing tonics, they were brewing belief. Belief that pain could be soothed, that death could be delayed, that maybe the next sip would be the one that changed everything. You raise a flask, watch it catch the firelight, and let a single drop touch your tongue. It tastes terrible, but you smile anyway. Your tongue still recovering from that vile drop, you shuffle across the cellar to a dim alcove where strange shapes are carved into the wall circles within triangles, a serpent biting its own tail, and something that looks like a suspiciously happy turnip. The alchemist calls this the sacred geometry corner. You call it suspicious and flammable. This is where the secrecy begins to creep in. Alchemy in the Middle Ages wasn't just an eccentric hobby, it was also a bit dangerous. Not because of mercury fumes, though that was definitely a problem, but because of what it suggested. That matter could change, that nature could be manipulated, that the world wasn't static but moldable, improvable by you, which to some institutions sounded an awful lot like heresy. And so alchemists learned to speak in riddles, to write in code. Their books are full of metaphors so dense you could use them as doorstops. Lions devour serpents, kings marry queens inside glass eggs. Frogs become doves. All of it is alchemical shorthand for chemical reactions, or perhaps for emotional turmoil, or perhaps for absolutely nothing. Historians still argue whether these texts were meant to conceal secrets, or if they were just deeply misunderstood medieval poetry with bonus explosions. You pick up a dusty grimoire. On one page, there's an elaborate diagram of concentric circles labeled with planetary symbols, astrological glyphs, and several unidentifiable squiggles that might just be doodles. This is the mandala of transformation, or possibly someone's shopping list from 1342. The alchemist explains quietly that each symbol stands for a stage of the magnum opus. Remember Nigredo. That's the black stage where everything decomposes. It's spiritual too. Ego, death, despair, the breakdown of certainty, which ironically sounds a lot like trying to assemble IKEA furniture without instructions. This need for coded writing wasn't just an intellectual exercise, it was a shield. In a world where the church cast a long, suspicious shadow, practicing alchemy too publicly could earn you a nice, warm seat at the Inquisition's bonfire. Of course, not all church officials were anti-alchemy. Some were quite interested privately. The promise of gold immortality or even just better medicine was hard to resist. But officially, the church distrusted anything that smelled of paganism, astrology, or secret knowledge. And medieval alchemy, bless it, smelled like all three plus brimstone and goat dandruff. Quirky tidbit: in the 14th century, Pope John XXIII issued a decree condemning alchemists who falsify gold, essentially outlawing fake alchemy. Not alchemy itself, just the scamming kind. A small but important distinction. Even popes knew not to throw out the goat blood baby with the vinegar bathwater. You notice a small ink-stained table covered in curious symbols, the planetary signs for Mercury, for Saturn, the classical elements for fire, for water, and the elusive squiggle that the alchemist insists means essence of soul. He then winks and says it might also mean hot soup. You smile. It's hard not to. The language of alchemy isn't meant to be easy. It's layered, part spiritual journey, part chemical reaction, part divine prank. Some scholars believe the complexity was intentional, not to deceive, but to weed out the unworthy. If you weren't willing to suffer through 50 pages of metaphor just to figure out when to add vinegar, then maybe you didn't deserve to discover the elixir. And then there's the smell. You might think the worst part of medieval alchemy is the mercury or the exploding glassware or the existential crises, but it's the smell. Imagine rotting egg, boiled cabbage, incense, old parchment, and that one aunt's kitchen who keeps all her spices in unlabeled jars. Add goat. The alchemist doesn't seem to notice anymore. He sniffs a beaker and proclaims it promising. You recoil and suspect it's what ghosts use to marinate. One mainstream historical fact: many of the odoriferous reactions in alchemy involved real chemistry: fermentation, calcination, sublimation, all precursors to modern laboratory science. Alchemists didn't just philosophize, they experimented, cataloged, compared. The stench was just collateral damage. And yet beneath all this weirdness, there's real discipline. You see a notebook filled with neat entries: date, temperature, ingredients, outcome. The handwriting looks like a spider panicked mid-sprint, but the content is methodical. You realize this is proto-science. Alchemy wasn't the opposite of science. It was its awkward, overly poetic uncle with a fondness for frogs. You follow the alchemist through a secret door. Yes, a literal hidden door into a narrow back room. Here lie scrolls wrapped in silk-locked chests and a collection of talismanic objects. Bones carved with symbols, stones wrapped in copper wire, and what appears to be a taxidermy hedgehog wearing a tiny crown. You don't ask. You've learned not to. This is where the lines between alchemy, magic, and mysticism blur. Some alchemists were deeply spiritual, using their craft as a path to divine understanding. Others just liked blowing things up and getting paid for it. Some were both. Historians still argue whether alchemy was more philosophical discipline or esoteric fan fiction with a decent budget. As you turn to leave, you notice a small note pinned to the wall. It reads, "He who reads the symbols with only his eyes will never find gold. He who reads with the soul may find something better." You stare at it for a moment, the candlelight flickering against the ancient ink. Then you sneeze. The alchemist smiles. "That's the goat dust," he says. Naturally, the next morning, or maybe it's still night. Time doesn't really exist in a cellar thick with fumes and ambition. You step out into the cool air. It feels like surfacing from a long, complicated dream full of mercury and Latin riddles. Your robe smells faintly of vinegar, rosemary, and something you refuse to identify. The alchemist follows close behind, squinting at the sunrise like a man who hasn't seen it in months. He wraps his arms around a stack of scribbled scrolls, vials rattling gently in his satchel. He says half to you and half to the wind. They won't believe any of it. You believe some of it, not the goat blood immortality part. Not the snake married a stone part either. But the intention behind it all that sticks with you. This was never about conjuring miracles from thin air. It was about understanding matter at its core, reshaping it, respecting it, and trying against every odd to master it. Even if your only tool was a stick of fire and a dangerously vague recipe that involved extracting the essence of the moon. But here's the twist: alchemy didn't vanish. It didn't fizzle out when the world stopped believing in powdered unicorn horn. It evolved. It put on a new coat, shaved its beard, and started publishing in scientific journals. The tools of the alchemist, retorts, crucibles, furnaces, were adopted by early chemists. The techniques distillation, precipitation, sublimation became standard in laboratories. Even the obsessive note-taking made the leap, and slowly alchemy shed its metaphors and symbols, replacing them with molecular formulas. It stopped talking about transforming the soul and started talking about transforming atoms. Same goal, better equipment. Mainstream historical fact in the 17th and 18th centuries, pioneers like Robert Boyle, yes, that Boyle publicly denounced traditional alchemy while secretly reading alchemical texts. Even Isaac Newton, the rock star of physics, devoted more time to alchemical study than to optics or gravity. Historians still argue whether he truly believed he was on the verge of discovering the philosopher's stone or if he just enjoyed the mystery. You walk through a market square now, the sunlight warm on your skin, and realize how far things have come. The apothecaries now sell actual medicine backed by evidence and peer review. Gold is no longer sought in vats of lead and sulfur, but in stock markets and blockchain wallets. And yet part of you misses the drama. Because modern science has precision, yes, but alchemy had personality. It had flair. It had flaming beards and riddles and a suspicious number of frogs. It didn't just seek knowledge, it performed it. Every experiment was a spiritual gamble, a cosmic improv act with real fire and hopefully minimal limb loss. The alchemists of old may not have understood molecules or quantum mechanics, but they understood wonder. They lived on the edge of discovery and madness, chasing perfection in a world that rarely offered even soap. They dared to imagine that everything from lead to the human heart could be purified, elevated, made golden. And in a way, they weren't wrong. Alchemy paved the path for chemistry, for medicine, for metallurgy. It was clumsy, confused, and often hilariously wrong, but it moved the dial. Quirky tidbit. There's a crater on the moon named after the alchemist Zosimos of Panopolis. He lived in 3rd century Egypt and wrote some of the earliest known works on alchemy. So yes, alchemy, despite all odds, made it to the moon. You sit on a stone bench watching a smithy light his forge. The bellows wheeze, metal groans, and for a moment you see it not just fire and iron, but transmutation. The dream lives on. Now as the world outside the cellar softens to early morning haze, your eyelids begin to grow heavy. The flames of curiosity that danced so wildly just an hour ago have settled into glowing coals. The vials have cooled, the notes return to their shelves, and even the goat, yes, that goat is peacefully snoring behind the firewood pile. You've journeyed deep tonight, not just into the rituals and riddles of medieval alchemy, but into a mindset that dared to imagine reality as unfinished. That believed transformation was not only possible but inevitable. If only you stirred long enough, believed hard enough, waited patiently in the candlelight for the ordinary to reveal its secrets. Whether in golden crucibles or glass laboratories, the same desire hums quietly beneath it all, the desire to know, to heal, to improve, to transmute something flawed into something sublime. So now let yourself rest. The fire has burned low. The pages of forgotten manuscripts are still. The stars once used to guide your distillations blink gently through the window above. You've earned this pause. You've listened to the hopes and failures of ancient hands. And though their recipes were flawed, their yearning remains a gentle echo in your own quiet search for meaning. Let it fade now. Let the rattling glassware drift into dreams. You are safe, you are still, and tomorrow will come golden or not. Sweet dreams.